Greetings! Today marks a day when we as a country, young and old, remember what occurred in the 1976 struggle for freedom in education. The youth of 1976, who are currently old and some have departed, took the initiative to fight against the apartheid system. The system dictated that they be taught in Afrikaans, a language they never wanted. The youth wanted to have freedom in deciding their language of learning, which was fair considering the fact that South Africa has 11 official languages. On a quest for their freedom in education, they marched the streets of Soweto with little to no care for their lives. The 1976 June 16 uprising that began in Soweto and spread countrywide profoundly changed the socio-political landscape of South Africa. Between 3,000 to 10,000 students mobilized by the South African Student Movement Action Committee peacefully marched and protested the government directives. This was led by the likes of Eliot Shabangu, Tsietsi Mashinini, Joe Qadi, and Naledi Tsiki, to name a few. The march was meant to culminate at a rally in Orlando Stadium. On their way there, they were met by heavily armed police who fired tear gas and later live ammunition at demonstrating students. This resulted in a widespread revolt that turned into an uprising against the government. While the uprising began in Soweto, it spread across the country and carried on until the following year. The aftermath of the events of June 16, 1976 had dire consequences for the apartheid government. Images of the police firing on peacefully demonstrating students led to an international revolt against South Africa as its brutality was exposed. Meanwhile, the weakened and exiled liberation movements received new recruits fleeing political persecution at home, giving impetus to the struggle against apartheid. Well, you'll be happy to know that today we are joined by our very own veteran of the gospel, who was also involved in the protest in Soweto that started on the 16th of June 1976 and the subsequent days. On the 16th, he was at work, but his brother was in the march, and he later on also joined the march on the 17th and in the subsequent days. Today, he'll be taking us through what really happened that day from an eyewitness perspective as we retrace the steps of the marchers in the streets of Soweto. Therefore, brethren, I urge you to sit back and relax and watch this documentary. God bless you as you watch.
We just arrived at the school Morris Isaacson. We're trying to cover the events that took place 44 years back in 1976 in what was described as the students' uprising. So we thought we should start here because this is where the youth leader, Tsietsi Mashinini, who was able to rally all the youth in Soweto, was schooling here at Morris Isaacson. Thank you very much, gentlemen and the lady, for allowing us to enter the premises of Morris Isaacson as we are trying to cover this for our youth who were not yet born at the time. This is the classroom where the leader of the youth, Tsietsi Mashinini, way back in 1976, was schooling. So probably a lot of planning was done in this classroom. He had, there were others who were assisting him. There were three main leaders in the team, but Tsietsi Mashinini was the brain behind it. So all the students left here. There was no schooling on that particular day, June 16. And you must also remember that there was a lot of planning that had gone into this thing before that day. Yes, because the whole issue was the language issue, which the previous government, which is known as the apartheid regime government, they were enforcing that schooling, the medium of instruction in schools must change from English to Afrikaans. So why did it particularly start at this school? The reason is that the person who built this school or supported this school was a Jew. He was Morris Isaacson, a Jew. And they were insisting that learning must be on a very high level. He was offering quality education. So when now the ruling government at the time changed the medium of instruction to Afrikaans, they opposed that. But now they needed the support of all the students in Soweto. So a lot of planning had gone into place before June 16. They were traveling from school to school during school hours. They had time to meet with the students at short breaks and whatnot. They were planning this thing. The planning was on a very high scale, very organized. They managed to visit all the schools. By the time June 16 came, it was the day of action now. But now the march started here. So we are going to be driving along the route that the students took, marching right up to Orlando West, where now there was a lot of trouble that took place. The why Orlando West? Because Orlando West is an area where most of the ANC political leaders were staying. Even the Nelson Mandela was staying in Orlando West. Walter Sisulu was staying in Orlando West. Other leaders of other political parties like Zef Mtuping was also staying in Orlando West. So there was also a lot of concentration in Orlando West. As they continued to march, the students that originally left Morris Isaacson were being joined by other students from other schools. There are many neighboring schools now which we did not go to, but the students were joining them. So by the time they got to Orlando West, it was a very big cloud of students involved, having many schools involved. There was no school that was functioning. All those schools from Naledi, Muletsane, Piri, they all joined the Morris Isaacson students, where the organizer of this march was schooling. So by the time they got here, it was a crowd you wouldn't control. And they were marching now, going to Orlando West, where we're going to pick up more details of exactly what happened there, because that is where the shooting started. We're now in Orlando West. The students came marching down from the road there up to this point. Now, at this point, they then met the police and all the force of the past regime. It was not only police, there must have been also some help from the defense force. But at this point across the road here, they had put a mark to say, as the students were marching down like this, nobody must cross this line, the demarcation line here. Hence we have this wall that was built here. It is to signal that at this very point, just across the road there was a demarcation line put by the security forces, that the crowd of students coming down the road, they had obviously come to pick up the students here. Just over the fence there is the Orlando West High School, which is another very big high school in Soweto. So they'd come to pick them up, and then there's another school behind there as well. And then they were planning their march that it should go past Mr. Mandela's residence, because this street is Vilakazi Street. There's a lot of history along this street. But now let's finish the demarcation line issue here. They said anyone crossing this demarcation line here is going to be in trouble with the security forces. So there was a young man who is also written there, Hector Zolile Peterson. I don't know whether he was already, I think he was in the junior high school or whatever, because he was still very young. We do not know whether it was from excitement or the steam of the moment of the time. He somehow crossed the demarcation line that was set up. And when he crossed it, the security forces made certain that they shoot him. They shot him. And when they shot him, if you keep seeing the photographs that depict the 1976 events, you will see a tall young man carrying him. He was already shot, but he was still alive. That tall young man is carrying him, and another girl running on the side. They both knew Hector. So they picked him up from here, and they traveled down this road. We'll be going back to the cars and see the road where they traveled towards where now we have the Hector Peterson Memorial. But just mark this, that the shooting, the first shooting started here. And the first student to fall in 1976 from being shot happened just at this point where we were standing now. So, as I've said, I'm just winding off here. There's a school beyond this wall, which is Orlando West. It also had a lot of activity, seeing that it is built in the area where Nelson Mandela was residing and all that. It was motivated a lot by the political atmosphere that existed. Now all these students now joined the big crowd that was coming from deep Soweto up till this point. So we're leaving this point now. Hector Peterson is being carried by that tall young man and that lady running next to him. They were rushing him to a nearby clinic, which is just at the end of this road. That is where we're going now. Coming from the Orlando West secondary area where the first shooting took place. Now the young man Wisa Makubu is the one who was carrying Hector. They crossed the robots here coming this side. The aim was to rush him to the clinic, which is just a few paces from here. But when they got to this point, Hector gave up the ghost, so we lost him. We are now at the memorial site of students' uprising against the language issue in 1976. A memorial site was built here. On my right here, you see the picture of the young man, Makuru, who was carrying bleeding Hector, and other students on his right-hand side. They were rushing to the clinic, which is just a few paces up there, but he did not make it. Just between the clinic and this spot here, he gave up the ghost. But then, years after then, this whole memorial site has been built. There is a lot of history here, this place, even the building across there, depicting everything that took place in 1976. Now we're driving down this road. There was regrouping done the following day on the 17th of June. They left again from the schools, and the focal point now was Orlando West Secondary. They gathered there, but other students came from the areas from Deep Soweto, and that big cloud marched down this road we're driving. I think the plan was to jump into the local trains and then move into the city of Joburg. Now they marched, and there was more organization done here at the Orlando Stadium. I think they were doing their final touches of knowing exactly that, because now they are about to exit Soweto. So there was they halted here, and there was a lot of discussion done, but they did not delay much. They then collected the last batch of students from this school on my right-hand side, one of the oldest high schools in Soweto. I also used to school here up to my matric. This is Orlando High School, which also had a lot of political activity. This is the one on my right-hand side. Okay, that's Orlando High School. So the last batch of students was taken from here. The march continued. We're not far from where it was finally stopped, but it was still continuing here. And more students came from Deep Kloof. Now, we got to this point. These structures on my left-hand side were not there. It was just an open field here. So, when we got to this highest point from this level, we could see the security forces up there, but the march still continued, armed with rocks and dustbin steel leads, you know, to block off the bullets. If ever you could be able to block a bullet with a steel lead. So we're still marching here. There were no structures built much. And on that particular day, I was also part of the march. Now, the march continued up to this point. When we got to this point, the security forces had made a long barrier line there. They were armed to the teeth. They had guns, they had tear gas, and when I'm saying guns, I mean they had live ammunition. And when we got here, they really meant business now. They first shot with tear gas, and the whole big crowd of students scattered across and running back into the township. Going back to the township, they made certain that all bottle stores and beer halls were burnt down because the students said this was the white man's doing, that at every railway station in the township they built a bottle store. So the students said, our parents can't sit down to think about the seriousness of our education, because when they come from work with their earnings, they get into the bottle store, empty their envelopes, they leave the bottle store, they are drunk, they can't think or reason. So the students made certain that all bottle stores across Soweto were burnt to ashes. So on the 17th, Soweto was up in smoke because of all the bottle stores that are being burnt down. No bottle store remained, and they emptied them completely. And no delivery van came into the township, no matter what they came to deliver. It was emptied and burnt. If it was bread, they took all the bread, burnt the delivery van. So life in Soweto came to a standstill. Now, from the 17th onwards, then the whole thing spread across South Africa. It first spread to Alexandra, which is in the northern suburbs. From Alexandra, it spread entirely right up to Cape Town, the whole of South Africa. So the history of South Africa changed forever since the uprising in 1976. So this is the story about the uprisings of 1976. Thank you very much for watching and listening.